They thought you were disposable. They thought you will break. They thought their circle of whispers and curses could stop the favor that rests upon your life. But they did not understand one truth. You were not chosen by men. You were chosen by God. And when God chooses, no demonic force, no alliance of witches, no counsel of envy, no conspiracy of the wicked can undo what He has ordained. They underestimated the anointing on your life, and now they are in deep regret. Yes, deep regret, because their plans has backfired in the way they never imagined. You see, when people come together to do evil, it always ends in self-destruction. They thought their numbers could overpower you, but they failed to understand is that one with God is always the majority. When they plot against you, they didn't just touch a person. They touched purpose. They didn't just speak against you. They spoke against divine destiny. They declared war not on your personality, but on God's plan. And that is where they made a fatal mistake. Let me tell you this. Witches don't only gather in forests and burn candles. Witches gather in boardrooms. They gather in family meetings. They gather in church pews. They gather in social media groups. Their potions may not be in bottles. They may be in form of lies, manipulation, jealousy, and sabotage. And when they united with one aim to destroy your joy, your favor, your future, they thought their unity will be their strength. But what they didn't realize is that the weapon of unity is evil, always weaker than the sword of divine purpose. They put your name in rooms that weren't invited to. They cast shadows over your name to bury your light. But here's what they didn't see coming. God was listening. Heaven was recording every word, every act, every false report, every demonic agenda. And while they were laughing at your tears, while they were clapping over your downfall, the Lord was preparing a table, not a small meal. A royal table in the presence of your enemies. And now they watch with trembling hands as the oil runs down your head and the glory shines on your face. They are in regret, not just because they lost access to you. They in regret because they saw what they tried to bury rise with greater power. They are watching you walk in freedom. They try to steal. They see you being celebrated in places they try to sabotage. They are witnessing a version of you they never believed could exist. Healed, elevated, focused, chosen, and it terrifies them. You were the one they laughed at in secret. You were the one they mocked in meetings. You were the one they thought was too weak to recover. But they made a fatal mistake by forgetting whose you are. You are not just a person. You are a carrier of divine assignment. You are wrapped in the favor of the Most High. And that means even your setbacks were sacred. Even your pain had a purpose. Every tear you cried was watering the seed of your next elevation. The mistake they made was not just attacking you, it was assuming God will stay silent. But our God is not just the God of mercy, He is the God of justice. And when you touch His anointed, you declare war on heaven's army. They came for your peace, but they exposed their own weaknesses. They came for your destiny, but they revealed their own darkness. They came for your joy, but they handed you the key to your next dimension. Now the regret is eating them alive. They smile on the outside, but their sleep is gone. They appear unbothered, but their peace is shattered. Why? Because every time they hear your name, they're reminded that their plot didn't work. Every time they see you rising, they're haunted by the reality that God covered what they tried to uncover. They are tormented not by your presence, but by your resilience. Because nothing is more terrifying to the wicked than someone who refuses to bow, refuses to quit, and still chooses love, still walks in purpose, still shines after the storm. Let me speak to your spirit right now. Don't chase revenge. Don't step down from your divine seat to fight at their level. You don't need to clap back because heaven already did. You don't need to explain yourself because God has already vindicated you in the courts of eternity. You just keep walking, keep building, keep glowing, keep showing up like you were never broken, because the regret they feel now is only a preview of the judgment coming for every act of witchcraft, every lie, every trap. This is your moment to rise. You're not who they say you were. You are who God destined you to be. Let their regret be their teacher. Let their downfall be their own doing. You stay in alignment, stay in grace, stay in excellence, because the same group that gathered to bury you will be the ones forced to testify of your breakthrough. And the same voices that mocked your fall will be stunned by your flight. You are not just surviving. You are rising as proof that no weapon formed against a child of God should prosper. They tried it, but it failed. They summoned darkness, but you are still the light. And every day you keep shining, their regret grows deeper, but not because they didn't succeed in hurting you, but because they helped activated you. You were not destroyed. You were developed, and now it's your season. Let them watch, let them wonder, let them regret, because what God is about to do next in your life will make the witches wish they never spoke your name. When they came against you, they didn't just come against your personality, your feelings, or your past. They came against something far greater. They came against divine purpose. They came against destiny itself. And that is the fatal mistake that will cost them more than they ever anticipated. You were not just another person in the crowd. You were not just some passing presence in their lives. You were a divine assignment wrapped in human skin. You were chosen, appointed, and released by God for a specific time, a specific season, and a specific mission. So when they tried to do you dirty, when they joined forces to pull you down, they touched something sacred. They laid hands on what was holy, and heaven has taken notice. You see, people often judge you by what they can see, your outer appearance, your flaws, your mistakes, your current struggles. But God doesn't anoint the obvious, He anoints the obedient. God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. And you, child of God, are called. Before you were formed in your mother's womb, God already ordained your purpose. That means your calling was settled before your enemies ever formed an opinion of you. That means your anointing was confirmed before the betrayal, before the jealousy, before the manipulation. So what they tried to destroy wasn't just your reputation, it was your revelation. It was the revelation of who you are in the spirit, the revelation of the impact you are called to have on this world. The problem is when people don't recognize your value, they treat you like you're disposable. They mishandle you because they can't discern the oil on your life. They disrespect you because they don't understand the depth of your purpose. But here's the divine twist. You don't need their validation to be valuable. Your purpose doesn't diminish just because someone mishandled it. A diamond in the dirt is still a diamond. A crown in a corner is still a crown. And what God put inside you cannot be tarnished by their gossip, their envy, or their schemes. That's why the attack didn't work. That's why the slander couldn't stick. That's why their plans fell apart. Because the moment they came for you, they activated the protection protocol of heaven. They touched the apple of God's eye. They spoke against someone who has been marked with destiny. And you cannot curse what God has blessed. You cannot bury what heaven has resurrected. You cannot silence what God has anointed to speak. This is why hell fears purpose. This is why the enemy didn't wait until you reach your full potential to start fighting you. He saw the promise in you early. He saw the light in you before you even recognized it yourself. That's why the attacks were so intense. That's why the warfare felt so personal. It wasn't about your personality. It was about your purpose. And the people who allowed themselves to be used as vessels of darkness, whether knowingly or unknowingly, aligned themselves against the will of God when they tried to damage you. You see, every time they lied on you, heaven recorded it. Every time they tried to block your opportunities, God took note. Every time they used witchcraft, manipulation, or slander to try to destroy you, they weren't just coming against you. They were resisting the advancement of God's kingdom. And God will never allow His kingdom to be shaken by the schemes of the wicked. That's why their efforts backfired. That's why their gatherings turned against them. That's why their curses fell on their own heads. Because what they were really fighting wasn't just a human, it was a vessel filled with divine fire. You carry something that hell cannot duplicate. You walk with a presence that darkness cannot imitate. That's why they feared you. That's why they envied you. Because no matter how much they plotted, they could never replicate the glory that follows your life. You are a move of God in motion. You are evidence of divine intention. You are walking proof that purpose cannot be assassinated, even if it's wounded. You are the reason their regrets are growing deeper, because they realize now that they didn't just betray a person, they rebelled against a purpose. And let me tell you something even deeper. God allowed some of it. Yes, He permitted certain betrayals. He let you be overlooked. He allowed the reaction, because in the fire of their attack, your identity was refined. In the heat of their wickedness, your spirit was awakened. They thought they were destroying you, but God was using them to reveal you. He was using their schemes to push you into your next move. Their darkness to highlight your light. So even their evil worked into elevation. That's why you don't have to seek revenge. Their regret is their punishment. Their silence is the proof of their shame. And the weight of what they lost, your presence, your support, your trust, your connection, is something they can never replace. They didn't just lose a person. They lost access to purpose. They lost access to favor. They lost access to blessing that followed you. Because when somebody is assigned to your life by God, honoring them brings blessings, and dishonoring them brings judgment. That's the law of the kingdom. So don't ever think you were the one who lost. You were the one protected. You were the one covered. Honoring them brings blessings, and dishonoring them brings judgment. That's the law of the kingdom. So don't ever think you were the one who lost. You were the one protected. You survived what should kill you. You smiled through what should broken you, and you stayed faithful to God even when people weren't faithful to you. And that, beloved, is why your purpose cannot be touched. That's why the oil of life will only increase. That's why their regret will become their teacher, because they touched divine territory, and now heaven is responding. You were never just a person. You were purpose in motion, and now no one can stop what God has started in you. They thought their gathering in the dark will stay hidden. They believed that if they came together in agreement, they will have more power to bring you down. They thought that numbers could override favor, that conspiracy could cancel calling, that collective wickedness could block divine elevation. What they failed to realize is that any gathering that stands against a child of God becomes a setup for their own fall. When people gather to do evil, they don't unify in strength. They unify in rebellion. And rebellion against God's will is always self-destructive. Their unity wasn't blessed. It was cursed from the beginning, because their purpose was rooted in jealousy, pride, and spiritual blindness. The group that gathered against you thought they were building a fortress, but they were actually digging their own grave. Every meeting they held behind closed doors, every whisper of gossip, every plan of sabotage, every strategy of manipulation, every ritual of control, all of it was seen by the eyes of heaven. They thought they were operating in secrecy, but they forgot the God who sees in the dark. They forgot that even shadows can't hide from the one who created light. While they gathered to curse, God was positioning you increase. While they were obsessed with your downfall, heaven was preparing your platform. And here's the part that will always confuse the enemy. You didn't fight back the way they expected. You didn't respond with vengeance. You didn't stoop to their level. You didn't retaliate with poison. Instead, you stayed quiet. You kept your hands clean. You let your tears water your prayers. You let your brokenness become your altar. And that silence terrifies them more than any reaction ever could, because lack of retaliation forced God's justice into motion. And once God steps in, no human alliance can undo what's been decreed in heaven. When the enemy sees that its attack don't break you, he goes into panic. When the group of witches saw that you keep rising, kept healing, kept glowing, kept walking in the grace, even after everything they did, regret began to set in. The more they saw God blessing you, the more they realized they had underestimated the power of His covering. The trap they set for you became the snare they walked into themselves. They tried to dig a pit for your name, but they fell into it. They spoke curses over your future, but now they're watching you walk into doors that was sealed just a season ago. And the regret is not just emotional, it's spiritual. Because deep in their spirit, they now recognize they were fighting against something holy. God allowed them to gather. Don't miss that. He didn't stop meeting. He didn't block the conversations. He didn't prevent the betrayal. Not because He wanted you to suffer, but because He wanted to expose. He wanted to reveal the motives. He wanted to clear the stage. He wanted to show you who really was for you and who was sent by the enemy to delay you. And once that exposure came, God flipped the entire situation. He flipped the plan. He turned the curse into a confirmation. What they intended to be your burial site became your launching pad. The people who conspired together thought that unity and wickedness will bring them spiritual dominance. No. But unity in darkness is fragile. There is no loyalty in evil. There is no truth in deception. The same people who ganged up on you will eventually turn on each other. That's what's happening right now. Their alliance is crumbling. Their lies are being exposed. Their secrets are leaking. The very circle they formed to destroy you has become a battlefield of chaos and confusion. And that's not coincidence. That's divine justice unfolding. They made you the topic, they made you the enemy, but they didn't realize that you were a vessel. You were chosen by God to carry a specific assignment. And by opposing you, they aligned themselves against the purpose of heaven. That's a war no man or woman can win. You weren't the target of their hate. God's plan in your life was, and that's why the battle was never fully about you. It was spiritual from the start. It was never personal. It was prophetic. That's why it hurt so much. That's why the betrayal cut so deep. Because the enemy wasn't attacking just your feelings. He was trying to paralyze your faith. But what the enemy failed to understand is that pressure doesn't break the chosen. It births them. The gathering against you only pushed you deeper into purpose. Their curses made you pray more. Their gossip made you go silent and seek God harder. Their rejection made you realign with heaven's voice. And now everything they did has produced the opposite result. What was meant to stop you has started you. What was intended to ruin your name has elevated your influence. And the group that thought they could destroy you is now watching in awe and confusion. They regret it now. They smile in public, but behind closed doors, they are haunted by what they did. Some of them don't sleep peacefully. Some are tormented by the memory of the words they spoke. Some are being visited in dreams. Some are now facing consequences they never connected to their actions against you. But that's what happened when you join forces against divine favor. You don't just lose your target, you lose yourself, you lose your peace, you lose your position, you lose your covering. Because when you rise against the chosen one, you cancel your own protection. You open doors to demonic torment. You sow seeds that grow into storms. And you didn't just survive, you shifted. You became more anointed, more wise, more discernment. Now you walk in clarity that only betrayal can birth. You walk in power that only pain can unlock. And this is why their gathering failed. Because God never lost control. You were never outnumbered. You were never outmatched. The presence of God alone outweighed their entire circle. And now, as heaven continues to promote you, their regret deepens. Because they know they touched what was never theirs to destroy. They tried to play God, but now God is showing them the cost. They wanted to control your narrative, but now they're being silenced. Shh. They laughed when you cried, haha, but now they tremble as you rise. And this is only the beginning. Because what God is about to do next in your life will become a testimony that no alliance of witches can stop destiny when it's in God's hands. The circle that gathers to curse you now becoming the stage for your vindication. Let them regret. Let them fall. Let God be God. They never imagined that the very thing they used to try to break you will be the same thing God will use to build you. They meant it for evil, but God turned it around for your good. That's the pattern of divine strategy. He takes the weapons formed against you and reshapes them into tools of elevation. He takes the betrayals and transforms them into blessings. He takes the shame they tried to place on your name and turn it into supernatural strength. This is why nothing they did succeeded. Because God is a master of using the storm to strengthen the very one it was meant to destroy. When they set you up to fail, they didn't account for the God in your life. They thought by removing support, by turning people against you, by lying on your character, and by throwing spiritual darts of manipulation, you will fold under the pressure. But they didn't understand that every attack only pushed you closer to the throne room of God. The fire they lit under you didn't consume you. It refined you. The weapon they aimed at your heart didn't kill your spirit. It exposed your purpose. And while they celebrated what they thought was your end, heaven was already orchestrating your next beginning. This is the power of divine reversal. It's when God steps into a situation, rewrites the script the enemy tried to alter. And he doesn't just fix what's broken. He uses what's broken to build something stronger. You didn't just come out of the storm with survival. You came out with strategy, with oil, with clarity, with wisdom, with fire. They thought they could crush your destiny, but they didn't know that destiny cannot be cancelled when it's authored by God. You are not here because you fought harder than them. You are here because you are covered by a purpose that hell cannot penetrate. What they did to harm you became the evidence God used to validate you. What they meant to disqualify you ended up qualifying you for greater. They never saw your pain as prophetic. They saw it as punishment, as proof that you were weak or unworthy. But they didn't know that pain in the hands of God becomes prophecy. They didn't know that reaction becomes redirection. When you walk in with the Holy Spirit, every moment they tried to humiliate you, heaven used it to humble and strengthen you for what was next. That's why they're confused. That's why the regret is growing. Because the version of you that's rising now, the healed you, the focused you, the bold and spiritual alert you, is far more powerful than the version they tried to destroy. Your tears were not wasted. Your silence was not wasted. Your isolation was not abandonment. But God pulled you back to prepare you. He let you cry in private because He was getting ready to elevate you in public. He allowed the betrayal because it disconnected you from what was holding you back. He allowed the heartbreak because it opened your eyes to the people who really were. And all of it, the loss, the pain, the confusion, the lonely nights, the spiritual warfare was part of a setup for a supernatural comeback. They thought the story ended with your silence. They didn't know that God was just turning the page. The attack forced you to grow. It pushed you into a level of prayer you haven't walked in before. It forced you into discernment. It stripped away distractions. It clarified your identity. And most of all, it positioned you. Yes, they pushed you, but in the direction of purpose. They threw you out, but straight in the arms of God. They mocked you, but God marked you. Hallelujah. They threw you out, but straight into the arms of God. They mocked you, but God marked you. They exposed you, but heaven covered you. And now everything they did is producing fruit they never thought possible. They slandered your name. Now God is making your name known in places they never had access to. They tried to shut doors, but those same doors are opening with greater force because God has stepped in as your advocate. And the beauty of it all is that they can't undo it. They can't stop it. They can't reverse it. Because what God does, He does in fullness. When God lifts you, no man, no demon, no witchcraft, no curse, no manipulation can bring you down. This is the season where you begin to see the rewards of what you suffered. You're beginning to experience the oil that was crushed out of you in secret. You begin to walk in the rooms that pain prepared you for. God didn't forget you. He wasn't punishing you. He was proving you. And now your very presence in the place of elevation is tormenting those who wanted to see you fall. They can't understand how you're still standing. They don't know how you still have your mind. They can't comprehend the peace you walk in. But it's simple. The grace of God built you in the ruins they left behind. God used what they meant to finish you, to fashion you. But what they did to harm you is now fueling you fire. Your testimony isn't just about survival, it's about divine reversal. They sent storm and God used them in sailing winds. They sent attacks and God used them as alarms to elevate your awareness. They sent darkness, but it only made your light shine brighter. You're not just a survivor of their schemes, you're a sign that no matter how many people gather, God is for you. Who can be against you? Now they're watching from distance, watching the one they mocked become a mouthpiece, watching the one they doubted become divinely endorsed, watching the one they counted out rise into power, clarity, favor, and grace. It's tormenting their spirits, not because you're being boastful, but because they now see you were never the problem. You were the promise. You were the one carrying something they couldn't handle, so they tried to break you. They tried to break you. They broke their own opportunity to witness your elevation closely. Let this bear your encouragement. Nothing done against you was wasted. Not one tear, not one prayer, not one sleepless night. It all worked into God's divine strategy to take you higher. They tried it, they plotted, they cursed. But all they did was triggering your transformation. And now, the very things they used against you are being used to lift you into places they'll never reach. That's what happens when God turns the attack into your advancement. They didn't expect you to survive. They didn't expect you to recover. In fact, they were counting on your silence, your disappearance, your breakdown. They thought that if they could hit you hard enough, embarrass you publicly, and turn enough people against you, that you will quietly collapse under the weight of what they did. But what they didn't count on was your resilience. They didn't know that within you was a spirit that refused to die, a fire that refused to be extinguished, a strength that didn't come from applause or validation, but straight from God. Now the regret is not just lingering, it's growing deeper within every step you take forward. Regret is tormenting them, not because they feel guilty for what they did, but because their plan backfired. They're regretting it because they thought they were ending you, and now they're watching you thrive in ways they never imagined. Their regret is birthed in the revelation that their betrayal became your breakthrough. Their regret deepens every time they see you walking in power, smiling in peace, living in purpose, and standing tall in grace. They tried to destroy you with words, but now your testimony speaks louder than their lies. They tried to ruin your image, but God elevated your character and made you untouchable. They're not used to people like you. They're used to people who break under pressure. They're used to people who crumble when slander comes. They're used to seeing victims stay victims. But you rose, you healed, you transformed, and it haunts them. It haunts them because your presence is now a mirror that reflects their failure. Not your failure, but theirs. And every time they see you, they are reminded they misjudged you, that they misunderstood your calling, that they mistook your kindness for weakness, that they confused your humility with helplessness. They thought your silence was defeat. No, it was strategy. You didn't waste energy defending yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you. You didn't argue with people who were never interested in hearing the truth. Instead, you stayed quiet and let God speak for you. And now that silence is louder than their noise. It's louder because it produced peace. It's louder because it preserved your character. It's louder because it gave room for divine vindication. God defended you in ways that words never could. He dealt with them in places you never saw. He handled the battles behind the scenes while you kept walking forward, scarred but sacred, hurt but holy, bruised but bold. They regret what they did to you because they realize now that they didn't just lose a connection, they lost a covering. When you were in their life, things flow better. When you were present, they were blessed by proximity. Even if they didn't, you were carrying anointing that was overflowing. And when they dishonored, they disconnected from that grace. The oil wasn't theirs, it was yours. The light wasn't generated by them, it was yours. And now they feel the absence of that favor. Now they realize that the glow they tried to dim was the very glow keeping darkness at bay in their own lives. The regret is proof of your power. It's evidence of your endurance. You didn't just survive, you outlasted them. And in your survival, you shattered their narrative. You proved that divine purpose cannot be assassinated by human opinion. You proved that resilience doesn't come from it comes from faith. They thought your faith will fail you when they walked away. They thought your joy will evaporate when they slander your name. They thought your vision will die in chaos they created. But what they didn't know is that every step they took away from you was a step that pushed you deeper into your calling. They regret it now because your elevation exposes their insecurities. Your healing highlights their brokenness. Your discipline reveals their immaturity. And your presence, the one they tried to humiliate, is now larger than life. They tried to erase you, but your name rings louder than before. They tried to contain you, but God expanded you. They tried to shame you, but now you stand in confidence. And none of it was because of revenge. It was because you trusted the process and refused to let pain make you bitter. Because your resilience became your testimony. Your bounce back wasn't just a recovery. It was a resurrection. You rose out of what should have killed your spirit. You walked out of the wreckage holding your dignity, your purpose, and your peace. You didn't let what they did make you cold. You didn't let it shut you down hard. You still love, you still serve, you still lead, because your healing wasn't surface level. It was deep, it was divine, it was driven by your connection to God, not your desire for vindication. Oh no. And now they sit in the ruins of their own decision. Their regret eats them. Not because they lost you, but because they can't undo what they did. They can't take back the lies. They can't erase the moments they celebrated your downfall. They can't clean the hands that used to tear your name apart. And now they must live with the reality that they were used as pawns by darkness while you were refined by fire. Their regret grows because they now know they mishandled the gift. They wounded someone sent by God. They tried to destroy someone covered in divine purpose. And that mistake is irreversible. But you kept moving. You kept showing up. You kept believing. And now everything they did to break you has become the very fuel that pushes you into greatness. You are not just proof that God can restore. You are living evidence that He can reverse the curse, elevate the rejected, and empower the misunderstood. Their regret is just the beginning. Because if God continues to lift you, expand you, and multiply the impact of your life, they will watch the same person they wrote off become the one that others look up to. You are walking resilience. You are purpose in motion. You are favor clothed in grace. And they will regret forever the day they thought you were disposable. Because you were never fragile. You were fortified. You were never finished. You were just being prepared. And nothing can stop you. What God has begun in you, their regret is not your responsibility. Let them sit with it. You keep rising. You never had to fight them. You never had to prove anything. You never had to expose them, argue with them, or return evil for evil. Because from the moment they turned their heart against you, heaven took over your defense. You didn't have to lift a finger because your elevation was never come through conflict, but through covenant. God made a covenant over your life that cannot be broken by gossip, slander, jealousy, witchcraft, or betrayal. Your victory was written long before they even decided to oppose you. That's why it never was your job to seek revenge. It was your job to stay in position. And that's exactly what you did. They tried to make you come down from your divine place and wanted you to fight back so they could twist your reaction into their justification. But you didn't. You kept your mouth closed. You kept your heart guarded. You let the storm rage while you stood still. And because you remained in alignment with God, He became your advocate. He became your voice. He became your vindicator. He stepped into the courtroom of heaven and pointed to your pain and declared, "This one is mine." And that was enough. That declaration shook the foundation of hell and confused every demonic force that tried to take you out. The power of restraint is one of the highest forms of spiritual maturity. Anybody can react, but it takes divine strength to respond with silence, to trust that God is handling what your hands cannot touch. And now the proof is evident. Your very existence is a response. Your joy is a rebuke to every lie. Your peace is the answer to every curse. Your success is an announcement that you are untouchable by the forces that tried to break you. You didn't have to shout, you didn't have to clap back, you let God fight your battles and He did perfectly. There is no greater revenge than peace, no greater response than elevation, and no louder voice than favor. God elevated you in full view of those who tried to disgrace you. He promoted you in the presence of those who conspired against your downfall. He expanded your territory in front of the very ones who said you weren't worthy. And that elevation wasn't for ego. It wasn't to boast or to stunt. It was a divine declaration that says, "This is what happens when my child stays faithful." Your victory is not petty, it's prophetic. You're not thriving to spite them, you're thriving because it was already written. And now that God has lifted you, no one can bring you down. That's what makes the enemy so frustrated. That's why they regret it. They see that their energy was wasted, their words were powerless. Their actions did nothing but speed up your process. Every weapon they formed actually worked in reverse. It sharpened you. It made you pray harder. It made you more focused. It made you less dependent on people and more reliant on God. When they cursed you, you went deeper into worship. When they mocked you, you went higher in faith. And when they walked away, heaven opened up. You were never alone. You were never abandoned. The rejection was a redirection. The silence was sacred. And in your solitude, you found strength. You realized you didn't need a crowd. You need clarity. You didn't need their approval. You needed alignment. And the moment you chose obedience over offense, God began to moving. Your enemies thought that by hurting you, they could harden you. But you stayed soft. You kept your integrity. You didn't become what they were. You didn't let the pain infect your purpose.